going to talk about something that you and I have had conversations with folks about, that you and I have seen personally, the eye-opening experiences, as well as help folks understand ourselves. And that is, most folks recognize that we're going to talk about life insurance, and most folks recognize they may not need it when they get to retirement, but sometimes they find out that they want it. And that creates this little shift, or this like, wait a second, what? It does what? So with your expertise and your background in the life insurance space and the wealth strategy space, I just wanted to bring you on so we can talk through this a little bit. So good morning.
Good morning, Brian. Thanks for having me on. We always have fun conversations, and I always appreciate your help, with some of my clients I work with, because you just bring so much sort of to the table around helping people see things that sometimes are sitting in plain sight. This is kind of a topic like that. It's a unique one. It's one that there's a lot of noise around, just like a lot of noise around different aspects of finances. So sometimes it's hard to get to the truth until you start digging a little bit. So I think we'll go a little digging today, and hopefully
let's do some digging.
Do some digging.
Yeah. So talk about that noise. I like that word that you use, noise, because that's very poignant, right? So what is the noise around life insurance?
Yeah, I mean, we hear enough, to an affectionate sort of term, talking heads around here, these financial gurus, and that, there's only one way that life insurance fits into our financial lives, right? And, you may have heard terms like, buy term, invest a difference, or, life insurance is a scam. It's like the worst investment. And these things kind of sit in the psyche of just everyday people, right? And I get it, right? We hear a lot of these things, and then you just assume it's all true, and you never do the additional digging or talking to others to maybe uncover the truth of it. And so a lot of those things, for the time they're coming out, a lot of it's marketing in a lot of cases, in my mind. And you got to kind of sometimes get past that to some degree and talk to the right people and learn for yourself. So people who are on this and listening to this applaud you for this, because it takes energy to be willing to learn and hear another side of things. And then you get the right to make the best decision for yourselves. So that's what I think about life insurance and finances in general. There's takes some effort, but I think it's well worth it when you do it.
Certainly. I mean, without question, in some form or fashion, the deck is stacked against us, or the odds are stacked against us, with the way that the financial industry works and the way that it sticks our hands. I talk about fees a lot with clients. I work very hard to help folks understand where their money's going. And quite frankly, nothing's inherently wrong with fees, which I'm going to come back and talk about that with term insurance too. Nothing's inherently wrong with fees, but I certainly want people to be empowered and knowledge and aware of what they're paying for, so they can make their own decision about, are they getting their money's worth? And I'll take this. So that was my little snippet of just, I agree with you that there's a lot that folks could benefit from having their eyes open to. And when we come back to the thread of life insurance, like we're talking about here, I want to say this, and you'll probably echo it. Anything we're going to say today about term insurance is not necessarily to mean term insurance is bad, right? Term insurance absolutely plays a role, but I would love for you to kind of talk about the shift that occurs when you start when you go from thinking about life insurance just about the death benefit, which is what pure term insurance is, to then starting to think about it, the shift to that, like a wealth shift, to thinking, wait a second, it might do some other things for me. Like, what's that sound like?
Yeah, it's a really good one, because we're so accustomed, for most people, and, see some of the devastation, say more recently around, say, Florida insurance, right? And protection of assets. And that is normal, right? It's good to have insurance, or right kinds, and the purpose of it. And to your point, term insurance plays a massive role for people, right? Because and it's protecting against something that is certain to happen in terms of some point in our lives. We just don't know when, right? So you're protecting against the asset, which we are, and Brian, I think you would agree, we are our number one asset. Our biggest asset to produce things for ourselves, for our families. So having term insurance is good, right? To protect against things that we cannot 100% control. So I still own term insurance. I'm a big believer in it. And I do it because I consider myself my biggest asset. I want to protect the heck out of it, right? For my family and for what I want for them. This gets back to the want. What do I want for them? right? And I want to do as much as I can to put things in place to allow it. So now you move away from insurance, the protection side, which is very important for our wealth.
And if I could, Tom, right there, because I like to, the name of the group is Plain English, right? So I like to I'm going to add a word or two to what you're saying there. Like the phase or the purpose that you've been kind of talking about term insurance right there is to help people cover a liability, like a mortgage or like future college planning if they themselves can't earn or they're not around to earn, or to protect from a loss of their income. Because that's where you were going towards, like, you're your most important asset. You're creating this income in your world. What if you get hit by a bus? Well, that, the death benefit is usually just viewed to cover that liability or loss. But I think you're about to share with us how that you can shift your perspective and start thinking about other attributes of life insurance in terms of how it can help you from a wealth building perspective.
Yeah. And that's the big shift, because, one is protecting your number one asset and your ability to earn, but then shifting a little bit and say, how could this product or, a different type of product that's still in the life insurance world turn into an asset, right? That's a very significant shift for people, because most people have never really focused on that because of a lot of the mainstream sort of advice around this. Never even thought about it as an asset that can be sitting there for you for the rest of your life, right? An asset. And a lot of it is a shift and even before, a lot of the world we live in now with stocks, bonds, mutual funds, bank accounts, right? Where we typically have dollars, that life insurance was a place where people were storing a lot of money, right? It was a typical place well before our time here. And now we think, the stock market's been around, everyone's been investing in it forever. Well, that's not true.
That's right.
Right. It's a still relatively new phenomenon. People used to store a lot of cash as a savings in life insurance, right? And they're protecting their families to the exact same thing you're talking about, Brian, from, be able to pay for things and mortgages to help them sort of live their lives. But they would store a lot of cash there that was accessible, right? But protects their family with the same dollar, right? So this is a very powerful asset, right? From a foundation, right? It's not, this is what we always talk about. We don't really consider it an investment per se, because it is a safe storage. It doesn't lose, right? And so it's kind of equivalent to saving money in a bank, right? In that sense, right? It's liquid, and it could be a powerful tool in a whole host of ways that we can cover today.
Yeah, I love that you went there, because it was on my mind, having had this conversation a ton of times too. It's that you're shifting. You're not comparing it to an investment, but it definitely becomes, with some of the things that you'll chat about, a terrific place to consider for some savings for a lot of different reasons. One of them being the tax benefits. That just makes my ears ring. I love opening folks' eyes about, their tax liabilities over time, how we can reduce that over time. Quite frankly, life insurance plays a significant role in, or should be part of the conversation, to see if people embrace it, to solve that. But if you could just talk through the tax benefits of life insurance, I would love that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like to frame things with thinking about taxes in general. People think they're negative, right? I have a different lens of it. I think we could think very positively around it and say, the government is incenting us to do things, and they'll give us tax benefits for it, right? Whether deductions, credits, because they want us to do things to help the economy, help, protect families. And one thing is life insurance. They want us to protect our families, because they want us to be able to let them still be productive and good citizens and not have the government have to not take over, right? So they want us to do this. So they give us tax incentives, just like starting a business so you can employ people. So if you think of that way, you're actually helping what the government wants to do by protecting our families, right? It's this amazing sort of thing. And so there's a lot of things, and it's written in the IRS code. We're not going to go deep into the details of it, but it's in the code, right? That there are a lot of benefits with life insurance. The one major starting point, and people may have, you, Brian, probably shared this within your group here around Roth IRAs, right? There's a lot of similar characteristics of properly designed life insurance policies that mimic Roth IRAs. You put after-tax dollars into this vehicle and they grow tax deferred on paper, right? Tax deferred. But if used properly in the way that the government wants us to use it, and it's not anything illegal, it's just the way it's designed, we could benefit from the use of those dollars that are stored in there and growing, and we can use them with no tax implications, no income tax. So it can mimic what a Roth IRA does. And so this is a great, and there's a lot of benefits to that because you can put a lot more into these types of vehicles than you could ever do in Roth IRA, right? And so for people who are maybe exceeding thresholds around Roth IRA contribution limits, you can put a lot of money in here and it'll grow tax deferred. And if used properly, I said tax free in terms of use of those dollars. And so it's a really beautiful sort of vehicle if understood in that respect. So imagine that same dollar sitting in your bank account and earns, say you're lucky enough to earn 2% in that same bank account, which I don't know where that is, but let's just say that is feasible. That 2% is taxable, right? Income tax, right? You're going to get taxed on that interest. Well, that means you have to earn a lot more to make the equivalent. Say you're in the same 2% in a life insurance policy. Well, that's earning like 3 or 4%, right?
Yeah, and the equivalent, right? There's math around that, but yeah, to your point, it's more powerful when it's not taxed along the way, or taxed when you use it.
Yeah, so it's you kind of when you compare that, and so this is where it's a great storage bin for that. And so obviously the use of those dollars through your lifetime, but what most people probably equate to is the death benefit, which is also it's done the right way. It's nothing, extraordinarily odd. It is protecting against a loss of your life, and that's an insurance claim. So it comes to your beneficiaries tax-free, income tax-free. And so that is, it works how it should work. But for people who are passing or want to pass wealth, right, this is a way to do it with no income tax connections to it or income implications. And for people who are, potentially dealing with estate taxes, there are also things that could be done that this could be used to pass money and avoid estate taxes as well, if done properly, right? So there's a lot of tax benefits tied to it.
Yeah, I love the fact that you talk through that stuff because, and in our world here, when we talk about retirement and these tax benefits, or retirement and life insurance, and opening up our eyes to the fact that no, we don't need it anymore. Our mortgage is paid off. We're not working, we're not replacing an income, although that could be challenged a little bit if you're replacing a Social Security check or you're replacing part of a pension or something. There could still be conversations around that. But a lot of folks are saying, hey, I have enough money in my accounts, in my bank, I have an income plan. I don't need life insurance. But once they start to realize how exposed they are to Uncle Sam taxing their traditional IRAs, every single distribution that comes out, or how exposed they are to Uncle Sam touching more and more of their Social Security check in the form of tax, when it goes from no percent taxable to half of it's taxable to a little over 3/4 of it's taxable. And then you start to realize Uncle Sam's going to force them to pull money out of their IRAs. We can get into this conversation like you actually just scratched the surface of, which is if we have this bucket that's growing tax-free, that can be used tax-free, and that will ultimately blossom into a larger number for our spouse or our kids tax-free, and we start to wrap our head around the numbers of what we might owe Uncle Sam, when he gets his hand a chance to touch things, like on our accounts when they go down to the kids, or on our estate or inheritance types taxes, we can actually start to leverage that cash that you're talking about, a better place for cash, and have it blossom into a bigger number, completely tax-free. And this all sounds fantastic, right? But I want to get into these misconceptions that you've heard and I've heard all the time. And this all sounds great. That's great. But Tom, we hear these misconceptions of, but I can't get life insurance anymore. It's too expensive. I'm too old. I was told to never use it. Maybe we can talk through some of those, like, age. Talk to us about a person that says they're too old.
Yeah, I hear this from time to time for sure. And, some people say, I wish I started 10 years ago. And then we know that saying, well, best time was 10 years ago or 20 years ago, but what's the next best time today? Right. And some people just need to understand whether it's a good fit for what they're trying to do broadly. Right. And you
Sure.
touched on it, Bryan, because, these in the world of finance, people can pigeonhole whether a product or strategy in isolation, right, in their financial lives. You and I know better, and this is what I think you're just a magician at, is understanding how these products work in your overall broader financial life and how they fit together, right, and how they work better together. They're not just isolated tools that you kind of can put blinders on and say, this is how it works. You have to factor in what else is going on, like your Social Security, like your other investment accounts, and how can they actually work cohesively together to maximize your income and your legacy. It's not an either or, right? We like to play in a world of and, like, how can we have everything we want,
Yeah, both.
right? As opposed to trade-offs, which is the typical approach around financial advice that, I think is really detrimental to most families. And so for me, like, from an age perspective, it's really taking a look, and this is why we take a hard look at people's situations, because there are a whole host of ways that, regardless of how old you are, it could really provide a huge benefit, depending on what you're trying to achieve. So take one basic example. I mean, we've had some folks who, maybe are in their 60s that are getting life insurance. Well, why the heck would they do that, right? We've already passed, my kids are grown, old adult. Well, they're looking at the way you described it, trying to figure out how to maximize their income and reduce their taxes. And they're thinking about legacy. A lot of people are not thinking about when they're 30s, like the death benefit. It means nothing to me, or not as much, right? They don't see that because they don't feel the inching forward and closeness of maybe their mortality. When people get older, that's a reality.
Fair point.
And more people want to provide for their next generation or their grandkids, or things that they didn't know were important to them. Things change. And so that's why it's important for people to take a look at what's happening today and be open to it, because there's a lot of ways that adding this asset actually makes the rest of your financial life that much better. Yep. My best analogy of this, and I heard this the other years ago, it's almost like salt. Right? If you're a chef and cooking,
I like this.
Right? Everything tastes a little better with salt, right? It adds, accentuates the other ingredients. They make them work harmoniously together. But in a lot of cases, too much salt is bad, right? Yeah. And we don't want to overkill it, right? Because then it masks or takes over the rest. So that's the beauty of the types of things that, I know Bryan talks about and helps my clients see, is how these pieces actually coordinate together to maximize everything you want instead of just need in your financial life. So it's a long-winded answer to say it depends, and it obviously is focused on individual sort of priorities and what they're trying to achieve. And it definitely can work for people in their 60s and even in some cases in their 70s, because we're living longer. That's a reality. Right. I hope to be here hitting triple digits. Right. I know you do too.
That's right.
And that longevity curve is getting longer. And so you may feel like 60 is old, but it certainly is not in my mind.
Yeah, fair point. And one of the words I think of when you're talking through how I like the analogy of salt makes everything better. Too much salt ruins things. What I've seen for the right situation, so to speak, these type of accounts, permanent life insurance type of accounts, are complementary to everything else, and they create a cohesiveness. They answer some they solve some perpetual questions and problems, that the tax problems, the place for safe cash that tend to constantly bug people, and it's complementary. But a second question, because we just talked about the age thing there. And you and I have both seen folks where it makes a lot of sense, even in 70s and early 80s. I've had a few early 80s where it made sense to start policies, when the right sense. But the second thing you might hear is permanent life insurance is too expensive. So can you talk through that for a second? And then we'll kind of button things up here in a few minutes.
Yeah. And this goes back to the the sort of world of buy term and invest the difference, right? The common sort of comparison. Look how much coverage you can get if you use a term insurance policy versus a whole life. Why would anyone in their right mind pay more for the same coverage? Well, it gets back to really looking at it just in life insurance and in life, I think in general. There are no deals, right? There are trade-offs. So in the world of life insurance, right, it's cheaper to pay for term insurance, clearly on an annual basis. But the likelihood for most people is that you're never going to use it, right? Statistically, that's accurate. So then all the money you put into the term policy never gets used again, right? You're using for insurance, right? And then you lose the death benefit.
Yeah, it just goes away. You stop paying for it.
It goes away. And that's an expense for us because those dollars never enter our lives again, right? That's an expense. So from the other side, when you're using a permanent policy, yes, it feels very expensive in the short run because you're putting out a lot more money. But in the long run, now you have an asset that is yours to keep, right? And your family in this lifetime and the next will benefit from it. So depending on your frame of reference, if you're just thinking narrow term, yes, it may feel very expensive. But if you broaden out, look broadly, and over periods of time, the expense of going with term insurance alone could be massively expensive to your family.
Yep.
And that's really the lens we have to look. And this is the type of stuff we help people see, right? And we like to think long term, right? But in the short run, that's where the narrow focus comes. And you have these, it's too expensive, right? Well, you're not getting the same financial vehicle. It's just a different animal. And you just got to recognize it.
Man, we did our best in the last 25 minutes to summarize some overarching concepts about shifting our understanding of life insurance from, hey, I used to need it, now I don't need it, right? To maybe I want it because of some of the things that you've opened up our eyes to. So I guess in a quick summary, I mean, you're about to publish a book, you have a podcast, you have your website, maybe you can just tell her, and you're part of our retirement in plain English group. You are. So if anybody wants to message Tom, you can. But real quick, give your website and the best way for somebody to get a hold of you.
Yeah, great. Yeah, perennialpride.com is my website. I have a podcast called the Perennial Pride Podcast. Is on in any sort of podcast sort of group, Spotify or Apple. And I did write a book called Wealth Beyond the Numbers. It was kind of a personal sort of journey that, it started with me just trying to say, what do I want to share with my kids about life that's helped me build wealth and build more wealth in areas of my life outside of finances, right? To have better mental state and just be happier, simple. So it's a book that it didn't start as a book, but now it's a book. And it's really something I'm proud of and something that hopefully will be helpful for people. Wealth Beyond the Numbers. You can buy that actually on my website.
Awesome. Thank you, Tom, so much for being here today, everybody. Tom is a part of the group, and now you know where to touch base with him. And this is a topic that we're going to continue to dive into now and then because of the importance of it over time. There's our coffee talk for today.
It's a dad mug.
That's a dad mug. I love it. Have a great, I'm going to wrap up and press end. Everybody have a great day.
Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
I'll see you.
Bye.